there was an interesting, well, you know that, because Bernie Sanders weighed in on this. So Facebook and Twitter decided to take down Trump's accounts. Hey, Silicon Valley can silence a president. Nothing to see here. Show's over. Okay, go home. No big whoop. Silicon Valley's more powerful than a president. So Politico, Bernie isn't a fan of Twitter's Trump ban. I don't feel comfortable about it. Cue the faux outrage in 3, 2, 1.
Shit.
So Bernie gets this one right. So
a year ago, he wanted him off.
And we'll see what he says now. Here's what he says now. This is again from that New York Times interview, where he said he doesn't have to convince us that the COVID was good. Do you think there is truth to the critique that liberals have become too censorious and too willing to use their cultural and corporate political power to censor and suppress ideas and products that offend them? Bernie says, look. You have a former President Trump who is a racist, a sexist, a xenophobe, a pathological liar, an authoritarian. Every one of those things you could say about Joe Biden.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Every one of those things you could say about Joe Biden. He's a pathological liar. He's an authoritarian. He's a racist. Said he didn't want his kids to grow up in a racial jungle. He's a sexist. I mean, and he's a xenophobe. Of course he is. Look what they did. He built those cages that they put kids in. He turned Libya into a failed state. He was for Iraq. He dropped more bombs in Syria than he ran out of bombs. You know, Joe Biden and Barack Obama dropped more bombs than George Bush and Dick Cheney. Every one of those things you could say that about Joe Biden. So and that's why Bernie didn't win. He's someone who doesn't believe in the rule of law. This is a bad news guy. But if you're asking me, as opposed to the good news guy, Joe Biden, but if you're asking me, do I feel particularly comfortable that the then president of the United States could not express his views on Twitter? I don't feel comfortable about that. It is an issue that we have got to be thinking about, because yesterday it was Donald Trump who was banned, and tomorrow it could be somebody else who has a very different point of view. Who do you think would be banned from Twitter if it was 1963? Do you think they would be banning George Wallace, or do you think they'd be banning Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Fred Hampton? Who do you think they would be banning from Twitter if it was 1963? Bernie Sanders, I don't like giving that much power to a handful of high-tech people, but the devil is obviously in the details, and it's something we're going to have to think long and hard on. It really says a lot about our politics when an 80-year-old has more reasonable take on tech issues than pretty much anyone else in office. It's time for a real digital Bill of Rights. A real one, not a bullshit one, written by people who actually know what they're talking about. We need Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. They're now the town square. We need to have the free speech rules that apply to speech in an actual town square apply here. Bernie Sanders condemns threats against... So he's consistent on this, by the way, because he condemns threats against Ann Coulter's speech at Berkeley. To me, it's a sign of intellectual weakness, he said. Sanders said, if it's a sign of intellectual weakness. If you can't ask Ann Coulter questions which expose the weaknesses of her argument, if all you can do is boo or shut her down or prevent her from coming, what does that tell the world? I don't want to nitpick, but the booing part I think you're allowed to do. You shouldn't be required to applaud. So what are you afraid of? Her ideas? Ask her the hard questions, he concluded. Confront her intellectually. Booing people down or intimidating people or shutting down events, I don't think that works in any way. Hey, Ann Coulter is like if hate fucked glitter, but she still should have freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ann Coulter is the answer to the question, what do racists jerk off to? But she should still have freedom of speech. And Bernie gets this right. And I don't go on Twitter much anymore, but I understand that he took... How do you feel about this, Justin? I heard Bernie was taking a beating from the shit libs for standing up for a principle.
I mean, I'm sure it's wild that this, censoring is really being pushed by the Democrats. Like it is being wholly pushed by the Democratic Party. And Bernie here says he's uncomfortable about it, but I mean, I don't think he's really planning on doing anything about it, unfortunately. They just had a hearing where they brought all these tech giants in and they were asking them essentially to censor more. So, I mean, honestly, eventually probably we're all going to be censored off of YouTube. Twitter has become such so intensely algorithmic that you hardly ever see anything that's outside of your, worldview. And so that's just the society we're building towards, is one of just like mass echo chambers. And then Twitter and YouTube essentially is going to turn into Facebook. All these platforms are going to just turn into mainstream liberal versus conservative thought. And that's it.
So that's what they're doing.
Which is really in opposition of how all these, especially YouTube, started, right?
It's called YouTube.
Right.
You're the people doing the thing. We took it away from the gatekeepers and we gave it to you. And now they're taking it away from you and they're giving it back to the gatekeepers, because when you log into YouTube, there's suggested videos and there's a strip right along the middle and it's all corporate news. And that's what gets recommended. And it used to be, if you watched one of those corporate news things, they would then suggest, like if you watched the corporate news thing about the minimum wage, and then they would recommend the most popular video that was also about the minimum wage, which would be a Jimmy Dore video or a Kyle Kalinske video. But now they're not doing that anymore. They'll never recommend our videos when it's come to a corporate algorithm. You'll get recommended Jimmy Dore videos if you're watching a Jimmy Dore video. It seems to be that's that's obviously happening, and I want to do a segment on it about how Jordan Sheridan called them out for what they're doing and how they're throttling independent news. Jackson Hinkle did a thing. Secular Talk just did a thing. It's a joke. So right now, Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks are supposed to have 5 million subscribers. He's on the corporate algorithm. And we don't even have 1 million because they stopped our growth. And how do they stop your growth? Well, they stop suggesting your videos and they unsubscribe people from your channel. They say, oh, they're dead accounts. They're not. My executive producer was already unsubscribed twice. Ron Placones would unsubscribe from the show. Everybody's would unsubscribe from the show. These aren't dormant accounts. That's how they suppress you. And so the Young Turks are supposed to have 5 million subscribers? Really? Then why do I get twice their fucking live stream viewers? They just got $24 million from the fucking man, and me in my fucking garage is doubling their numbers, but somehow their videos still get a lot of action. Why? Because they're on the corporate algorithm and their videos get suggested. So if you want to go watch that shit, go ahead. You want to go watch corporate news, go watch the Young Turks, because that's what that is. Go ahead, Steph. Well, right now, I'll just tell you right now. I'll tell you right now, there are 9,000 people watching the Jimmy Dore show. There are 4,000 people watching the Young Turks. Just to let you know. They have 5 million subscribers and they can scrap up 4,000 of them to watch their fucking live stream. I don't believe those numbers, and you shouldn't either. And they're on the corporate algorithm, and that's when you have Jeffrey Katzenberg on your board. The Young Turks have a board. You think Cenk gets to make his own decisions? He has a board with billionaires on it. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.